I did a video almost 2 years ago about the rivet guns I was using for my Sling TSI build. So it's been so long, and I have gotten a lot of views of that video, way more. It was one of the first videos I did. And I thought I would do an update video to kind of talk about my experience with these tools. And I actually didn't talk about this one, but I'm going to add this into the mix. This is a hand puller. And kind of talk about my experience now that I have done thousands and thousands of rivets building my plane. So as sort of a primer, these are pulled rivets, blind rivets. Some people used to call them pop rivets, which is sort of a derogatory, cheapy kind of name for these if you're fixing your screen door or something. These are aviation grade, and they're being used more and more and more for the building of aircraft because they're so much easier than driven rivets or solid rivets. There's a double handful of aircraft manufacturers that are using these now in the experimental kit built world because it saves a lot of time, and it just makes it easier for the novice like myself. Now I have pulled a lot of rivets now, and I'm getting better with these, but it's been an interesting experience building the plane. So the rivet gun that I liked the best in the beginning is still my favorite, and this is the Proset XT2. This gun is a pro commercial quality rivet gun. It's high price. It's in the $800 to $900 range, depending on which tips, if you get an air hose, if you get extra spare parts kits and that sort of thing. But it's a really good, really fast gun. Now, if you watched my video almost 2 years ago, the gun looked a whole lot better than it does right now. So it's gotten a little wear, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The one I didn't talk about in my last video, but is absolutely essential if you're going to build an aircraft or just for repairs around the home, is this little guy. I got this on Amazon for 20 bucks. It's called a Marson HP2. As you can see, I've got tank sealant all over it. It comes with built-in tips that you can just unscrew, and you can change out the tips depending on which size rivet you have. You can pick the right tip for the different rivets. But it's a hand squeezer, so you would put it over the rivet, and then you just have to use hand grip strength to actuate it. It can be a little difficult at times on bigger rivets. I happen to have pretty strong hands. I don't have enormous hands, but sometimes I'm like getting both hands or trying to set it against something to use it. But what makes it essential in building an aircraft is this. It is so skinny compared to this, or even this. It just fits into spaces that these other rivet guns will not. And for that reason, if you're going to build a plane, I would get one of these. They're not expensive, and you will end up using it. I've also used it quite a bit when I was doing my tanks. For those of you who are not aircraft builders, when you build your gas tanks, you're using a sealant, and the sealant is on the rivets as you put them in, and then you squeeze them, and that sealant gets on everything. So if this gun jams, you kind of have a backup, because you're on the clock with tank sealant, so you got to keep going. So I would always have this one at the ready so I could keep going, and I did quite a few rivets with it in that respect, but then also just tight, getting down in between pieces where this is too big. So highly recommend it. Like I said, it was on Amazon. It was like 20, 25 bucks. It came in a little case, and it has worked very well. This one is the Milwaukee. I think it's the M12 rivet gun. I think Milwaukee actually makes a bigger, heavier duty one now. But my gun I bought used from another builder who had to stop building. And I mentioned it in my other video, but it had sat in a storage building, and he lived on the coast in South Florida, and it had some corrosion on it. And I had from the very beginning, almost the very beginning, it was jamming a lot. The rivets would get pulled, but then they'd get stuck inside the assembly, and I would have to take the tip off, and I'd have to take everything apart to get the rivet stem out. And that became a real hassle. And that's why I bought this gun. Now, this gun, I think, and I'll put a link to an Amazon price, but you can buy these all over the place, is about $300. And in good condition, there are build assist shops that use this rivet gun. There are a lot of Sling TSI builders who are using this rivet gun, and some of them have had some of the jamming that I've had. Normally there's a catch collection tube on the back, and you would pull your rivet and then you would kind of tilt it and it would fall into the back. I've never been able to do that, so I just took that collection piece off. Mine, I have to manually pull the rivet stem. It gets stuck, and I have to pull it out every time, but it does work. And the nice thing about this is it's not real loud. So if you're a builder who's building, I have a hangar. I live in a fly-in community, which is not the usual for home builders. Usually in your garage next to your house. You may have kids sleeping, you're out in the garage at 9 o'clock at night. And this one has a volume because it's pneumatic, it uses an air line. And the other thing about it is that your compressor it goes through a lot of air, and your compressor is going to be kicking on if you're doing a lot of riveting. So if you have a noise issue, this may be a better bet for you. I know some people who bought one that it was jamming right out the gate. They took it back to the store. They bought it from Home Depot or Lowe's or somewhere, got a different one, and then had no problems. So I think this is a good version. It's just that if it starts jamming on you while it's still under warranty in your first 30 days of owning it, send it back and get another one, because they may have some quality control issues or something. I don't know, but since I did this video, a lot of comments, and people have emailed me and just talking to other builders. Some have had really good success with this. So like I said, in certain circumstances, it's the ideal rivet gun because it's battery operated. You don't have an air line. You don't have the noise of an air compressor. I have a large air compressor, so it's pretty loud. And this is a good alternative. When I first started building, and this one was jamming to the point where I had to take the whole gun apart, every single rivet I pulled, I went to Harbor Freight and just got a cheapie to get me by until this one came in. This took like 5 or 6 days to get here, and I had a whole weekend I wanted to build, so I went and got this gun. And Harbor Freight makes 2 or 3 different rivet guns, and this is their bottom tier of the full-size frame rivet gun. And I'll have to pull it up. I'll put a link in the video. This is the $40-ish. I think it was $39 when I bought it. And it's adequate. I would not build a plane with this rivet gun. It's just, it barely has enough power for larger rivets. It does fine for the small rivets. When you pull it, and if you watch my previous video, I did some actual rivet pulls, and you'll see it pulls the rivet and then it just falls out the front, or you have to quickly tilt it and then it goes into a little catch thing. But the catch thing has these slits on it, and then the rivets this rivet stems just fall out anyway. So I took it off immediately. But for small home repair projects, if you're doing a screen door or like a screen room enclosure that you need to put in some rivets to repair some sheet metal, a little metal, this is all you need. It'll do it just fine. And Harbor Freight will sell you some cheap pulled rivets, and it's very effective. Most people don't even really understand what pulled rivets are, but for some household repairs, it's great. You do have to have an air compressor, but for this gun, for small projects, you don't need a great big air compressor. You could have a little pancake, a little Craftsman around the house, air compressor. It works just fine. This one needs a little more volume of air because it pulls air through all the time. So once you turn it on, and if you watch my other video, it's more about the operation of this gun. Once you turn it on, I don't have it hooked to air right now, there's air blowing through here, pulling the rivets into the catch, the little catch collector. And it's so fast. It's like, you could just keep going as quick as you can, you know, put the nose over your rivet. It'll pull them. This one is, it's a lot slower, but of course it's quieter. And then this one is probably about the same speed. And for smaller rivets, it's fine. For larger rivets, it just doesn't have the power. I did a couple 4.8 millimeter rivets, which is part of some of my build, and it can barely pull them. Sometimes you gotta kind of double pump it to let it regrip and then pull some more, because it just doesn't have the power that this professional quality rivet gun has. So as you can see, I've done just thousands and thousands of rivets on my plane. The wings just have lots and lots of rivets, and they're in straight lines, and you can really get into a rhythm with this rivet gun. You can just really go to town. Whereas this one is a whole lot slower because you're pulling the stems out or you're knocking them out. The same here. And you just absolutely, your hand would be fatigued after 5 or 6 with this. So you would not use this for doing the rivets on a wing, because you've got hundreds of rivets lined up. And I'll insert some video of doing a wing piece with this gun just to kind of show you how fast you can go. So in summary, to talk about this one in particular, it's a top shelf price. Like I said, $800 or $900, depending on how you get it equipped. There is a knockoff version of this floating around that I know some people have found. It's available online. I tried to find a knockoff about a year ago, and I couldn't find a reliable place that I felt like it was like, email this guy and give him a credit card, and I wasn't gonna do that. I think he was some guy who was buying them from overseas and just shipping them out of his house. At the time, I couldn't find a business. If I can find the clone of this, it's half the price. I'll list that in this video. But from what I've seen online, it's good. Maybe not as good as this one, but it's a pretty good knockoff version of this for half the price. Long-term longevity, it's hard to say. I have had some jams with this, and I think I'll do a video of how to take this apart and clean it just separately, just talking about just this gun and how to clean it. When I mentioned the tank sealant, it's basically like this indestructible liquid rubber, and it sticks to everything. But when you're pulling rivets, you get that sealant on here, and as much as you wipe it off as you're going, it'll get in there and it'll cause some jams. Also, you just get it. I've gotten it on the gun, as you can see. I've not really spent a lot of time cleaning it up. I just sort of wipe off what I've gotten on here, but I haven't really scrubbed it down. I've got some tank sealant on this nose piece. The other problem with this is because it's connected to an air hose. I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times I have stepped on this and pulled it off. I'll have it sitting on the table and I've pulled it off. Now the gun has survived no problem. The little catch mechanism here has not fared as well. This is just, it's hard plastic, but I've cracked it like 4 times, because when it's fallen, it'll hit and it's just cracked right where it goes into the threading. And the thing about this gun is this has to be in place for it to operate, because that's what helps get, I don't know if it's a Venturi effect or what the sort of mechanism is to pull the air through and make a suction with the airline, but this has to be in place. There's actually a little button that it won't turn the air on unless this is in place. You can buy a replacement for $55. It's a little expensive, but in line with the gun, I understand. If I build another plane, I'll definitely have to probably send this gun off. I bought this from a company called 3 Day Tool, and they'll refurbish. I think they say every 5,000 rivets. I don't know that I've done 5,000 rivets. I've done a lot. But if I built another plane, which I've toyed with the idea of doing it in the future, I would send this to 3-Day Tool and let them rebuild it and then get me a new one of these probably at the same time. It still works fine, but it just really looks horrendous. I used some steel epoxy that I had, some really strong epoxy, and it's got a gray color, so it really looks terrible. But it works fine, and it's functional. It's just ugly. But anyway, again, I think that if you're building a plane, you need to have a primary, especially for the wings. You're just doing so many rivets. It's such a time saver. You got to have one of these for tight corners. It's 25 bucks, and if you're building a plane, that is like the cheapest thing you're going to buy. If you would like to make this your primary, it'll work just fine. It's a little slower. If you get a good one, it's going to work just fine. It's not as quick as this, but then again, I told you the perks. It's quiet. You're not going to have an air compressor running in your garage at 10 o'clock at night or at 6 a.m. if you're out there trying to do a little work before you go to work. If you're a home builder, this I wouldn't recommend for building a plane. This is for home repair. You got 4 or 5 rivets you need to pull for some project, some screen enclosure, some little repair. This is fine. Now, like I said, Harbor Freight does have other models of this gun. There is one that they were out of stock when I bought this one that's like the $100 version. I don't know if that one is dramatically better than this or not. They didn't have it in stock. And I wanted a gun that day because I wanted to build all weekend. I had just gotten my kits for my plane and I wanted it to build on. So I went and bought this. It got me through the weekend. Not great, but it did a fair job. After that, it went off to the side. Like I said, it's good backup. If you're doing your tanks, I went ahead and had it set up and ready to go just in case one of my other guns jammed when I was doing the tanks, because you got this like 2-hour window for the tank sealant before it dries. So you don't want to have to take apart and clean this. You want to just keep going. So I had my spares ready to go. Also, there's a couple different size rivets, and it's nice to have one gun with one size rivet nose piece and another for the other, and then that way you don't have to be switching out nose pieces. The little nose pieces I mentioned, they're different sizes based on which, the size of the rivet stem you're using. This one came with the 3.2, the 4, and the 4.8 rivet stems. The smaller, you can get a 2.8 millimeter rivet nose piece for this gun, but it doesn't pull those little bitty rivets as well. They sell an XT1 version of this gun, which is a little smaller, and it's designed for the smaller rivets. There's not very many of those small rivets in my build, so I didn't use it that often, but it's definitely something that I would consider if you had a plane that had a lot of smaller like 2.8, 3.2 millimeter rivets. Also for the tank on my plane, they use a different kind of rivet. These dark stems are from those kind of rivets, and they just have a smaller stem on them. And again, this gun handles it, but not as good as I think it should. Sometimes you'd have to fire it a second time, or it wouldn't pull it right. So if you were going to be doing a lot of small rivets, I would get the XT1. If you're doing more medium to large rivets, get the XT2, or if you can afford it, get both. I know there's at least one builder who's done that. Overall, my plane's I'm getting on. I hope to have it flying by summer. I've used the heck out of this gun. It's been great. I had, like I said, just a couple of jams, mostly related to tank sealant getting in the innards. You pull it apart, clean it real quick, put a little grease on it, and put it back together. I'll do a video on that. This one, I wish I had a good, clean copy of it and I could do a better review of it. but it has some real pros. It also has a head smaller than this one to get into tight spots. So it's nice because this has a lot of power, whereas this, it's your hand. So that's the difference. So I'm gonna put a few videos of me using these tools. I have another video that I'll link that shows the original review like a year and a half, more than a year and a half ago, that actually shows me pulling rivets that you can look at. And some links to where you can buy these things, just so you can kind of see exactly what it is that I have here. Again, Harbor Freight, I don't know the model number. This is the M12 from Milwaukee, Proset XT2. This is Marson HP2. Again, I don't know anything about this one. I bought it on Amazon, but it has worked really well. It's held up to some big rivets and a lot of use and a lot of abuse. So anyway, that's sort of my update. Obviously, I've been successful. I've gotten way far down the road with my build, and we're moving on. So thanks for watching.